How to create a simple calculator using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. That's the calculator that we are going to build in this tutorial. That's the basic operations done in calculator. There's a backspace and clear button as well. The link to the code is mentioned in the description box below. Okay, let's get started. Here I use brackets as the code editor, and I use live preview option right here to see the output as we code. I've created 3 files here: index.html, style.css and script.js. I open up index.html and start with HTML head and body tags. I'm going to link the style.css and script.js files. Also, I'm going to use Google font here, so linking that here as well. I'm going to give the title to our web page as a simple calculator. The title would appear in the tab of our web page. Inside the body tag, I place some sample text, a simple calculator. Now let's go to the CSS file. Under the body tag, we'll declare the font family as Open Sans. Now you can see the font has changed. I open up the completed version of the calculator. You can notice there's a black background, another container, and the calculator. So let's open style.css and give the background color as black. As for the container, let's give a div container. Let's give the width, height, and background image. Now let's set the margin for the container. The top and bottom spacing is set to 20 pixels. The left and right spacing is set to auto, which places it center horizontally. Now let's give a container for calculator. Give it a width, height, and background color. Now the calculator doesn't stand out. If I open the completed version of the calculator, you can see the background is a little dark. To achieve this, we give a linear gradient above the background image of the container. Now the calculator appears much better. Let's center it horizontally. Give it some space on the top. This doesn't work, so let's set the position to relative. Give it a border radius for curved edges, also a box shadow. To know about box shadow, let's open the console by right-clicking and inspect element. Go down the hierarchy to the calculator element. You can see its properties below. The first two are the X and Y offset. This way the shadow falls down. If I increase the X offset value, you can see the shadow falls towards the right. The third parameter is the blur. The fourth parameter is spread, that spreads across the specified length. The final one is the color. I have given 2 shadows. If I change the color, it will be much more visible. Alright, let's set it back. I open up the completed version of the calculator. You can see the calculator have a section for displaying the result and a section for the input. So let's go back to the index.html and give both the containers. Inside the results section of the calculator, we display the history and the result. So let's give containers for them too. Now for keyboard, I give all the keys as buttons. I use hex code for divide and multiply signs. The operator class for all operators, number class for all the numbers, and empty class for all the blank spots. Let's go to style.css and give the result and keyboard its height. As you can see, the keyboard takes lots of space. Now for the history and the output sections of the calculator, let's give some sample text for now. Let's make text align as right. Give history section some height, margin, padding, font size and color that distinguishes it from the actual output. Also, let's give some height and margin to the output section. Let's give a bigger font to the output to make it stand out. Now for the keyboard, we need to style operators, numbers as well as the empty spots. Let's give them width, height and margin. Let's give them float left. Let's give the border radius as 50% so it appears circular. Let's remove the border width. Also, let's give the font weight and the font size. Alright, now if you see, in the completed version of the calculator, the number and empty spaces blend along with the background color of the calculator. So let's give them the same background color as the calculator. Now let's give the cursor property as pointer to all operators and numbers. So when we hover, the mouse pointer turns to a hand symbol. Let's give it some style when the user clicks. We do that using active pseudo class. Now when I click, it appears to be small, although the line appears when we click. So let's set the outline to 0 under focus pseudo class. Now the outline disappears. Alright, in the calculator, you can see all the operators in the right have different colors. As you can see, every fourth button in the row needs to be changed. We use nth child selector to select these elements separately. Let's give them a bigger font size so they would appear bigger, and of course the background color. Now the same I'll do for the rest of the operators, every fourth element. Now the design of the calculator is completed. We'll start with the logical part of the calculator. We'll use JavaScript for the logic. First, we need to manipulate the history and the output sections. Let's open up script.js and give getHistory function that would return us the history value. We get the value using its ID and using inner text. To test this, let's give an alert statement. Alright, that prints the history value 9 cross 9. Also, let's give printHistory function to print history value. We get the parameter and set it to the history value. Let's try it. Alright, that works. Now similarly, let's give print output and get output function for the output value of the calculator. Now the print output works fine. But if we see the completed version of the calculator, you will notice that the result is represented with comma separated values for better readability. To achieve this, let's use a separate function, getFormattedNumber. This function reads the number and returns a comma separated value. It's so easy to do this. We use toLocalString function and give en as a parameter to achieve this. Let's return the value. Now you can see the output in the calculator is a comma separated value. Now if I want to clear the output, I set the empty character inside the print output function that would clear the output. Unfortunately, if I try that here, that sets the output value to 0. So let's give this a check before we format the number. If the value is empty, we set the output to empty. Or else we convert it to the comma separated value. Now, to manipulate the output values, we need to convert this comma separated back to the original number. For that, let's define a function, reverse number format. This will replace the comma to an empty character. The character that you want to replace, you should specify it between slash and slash g, and the character that you want to replace it with will be given next. Let's use alert statement to check if this is working. Yes, it works and the comma is removed. Alright, let's remove all the dummy text from the calculator. Now let's get to the operations using operator class. Now that's a list of operators. Let's use for loop to access one by one. Let's give a click event listener to all of them. Inside this function, we can give what action we need to perform when the user clicks on the operator. For now, let's just give an alert statement that displays the ID of the operator that the user clicked. Alright, that works. Let's do the same for numbers. Okay, that displays both numbers and the operators. Now let's remove all the alert statement and proceed with the logic. Let's start with numbers. In the completed version of the calculator, you can see if the output is a number, the number that user clicks just gets concatenated. So let's first get the output with commas removed using our remove number format function. Let's check if the output is a number before we proceed. Let's concatenate the ID to the output and print it. Let's see if that works. Yes, it does. Now for the operators. Let's start with the clear button. In calculator, the clear button would remove both history and output. So in our JavaScript file, let's add the code. We check if the ID is clear. Then we set both history and output to empty character. Now for backspace. First, we convert it to the number format, as the backspace should not deal with the commas in the output. We convert it to a string and remove the last character using substring function and print it back. Let's test it now. Okay, that works fine. Now for the other operators. The operator in the calculator does not work if output is empty. So let's first check if the output is not empty before we proceed. Let's give the number format of the output. But before that, let's declare both output and history values. In the calculator, when an operator is clicked, the output value is first added to the history. So let's add the output to the history value. If user clicks on the equal sign, then history is evaluated. The result is printed in the output and the history is set to empty. For other operators, the operator gets added to the history and the output is set to empty. Alright, let's test this. If I click on an operator, the output and the operator is added to the history. When I click equals to, the result appears. Now there are few test cases here. If I try to use backspace on negative values, it gives NaN. That's because the backspace would finally print the output. Under print output function, we format for comma separated values. Because it's a minus sign, this says this is not a number, NaN. To fix this, let's give the condition in getFormatedNumber function. If the input is a minus sign, we return empty value. Now let's test this scenario. Now it works fine. Now for the test case 2. In this case, once I give the operator, I'm unable to change it or get the result. To fix this, first let me open up the completed version of the calculator. You can see in this scenario, the last character is removed. So if we click on other operators, it just gets replaced. Here, the output is empty and history is not empty. So let's go back to the JavaScript file and give the condition. Let's check if the last character is an operator using is not a number function. And remove the last character using substring function. Now we need to change our condition here as well. This logic must work if either the output is not empty or if the history is not empty. Another change is that if history is not empty, whereas the output is empty, then here the output must be set to an empty value. It will be converted to a number format only if the output has a value. We do that using the conditional operator, which is similar to an if-else statement. If the condition is true, the first value is assigned to the output, else the second value is assigned to the output. Alright, let's test it. Yes, it works perfectly fine. Now with this, there are many test cases which we won't be covering up in this tutorial. So that concludes our simple calculator using HTML, CSS and JavaScript tutorial.